Hi, folks. Welcome back to What's the Dilly-o, where we talk to founders that are reinventing financial infrastructure. Today, we have a representative from Tactile. Max, welcome. Tell us all about what you're doing at Tactile.
Hi, and thank you very much for having us, Kanishka. Super nice to meet here. My name is Max. I'm one of the co-founders of Tactile, and I run the product and engineering side of the house. We are an AI decision platform for banking. So we focus on risk and compliance use cases across the board. So from credit underwriting all the way to AML and transaction monitoring. And we see ourselves really as a modern reincarnation of the very old and established category of decision engines. Um,
Fair enough. I'm surprised that you're calling old decision engines old and established because historically decision engines have been built in-house and kind of like duct taped together. What's your definition of a established decision engine?
I mean, it's kind of funny because sometimes I joke that the IBM of our category is actually IBM. IBM has a
Yeah.
decision engine and it's still in use. I mean, we have customers that migrating off of IBM, what's it called? Operational Decision Manager, which is basically it's a rules engine. So we do a lot more than a rules engine, but
Mhm.
there is a category there which has very similar value props around empowering the domain experts to move fast. It promises agility. It promises getting rid of all the crust and the rigidness of coding this up yourself. So some of the value propositions are extremely similar to what was promised even 25 years ago by IBM. But of course, today it looks very different. And what we did, like our product and their product, there's not a lot in common when you look at it from a product perspective, but the value and the promise, I think, has not fundamentally changed, except now there's AI and there's, modern programming languages and there's machine learning, etc.
Got it. Fair enough. So let's kind of start at the beginning. What kind of led you into building a decision engine, especially given that you think that it's a pretty crowded space?
Yeah, I mean, I think modern decision engine is actually not a crowded space at all. It's actually a contrarian thing to be building. But we started life focusing very much on machine learning for financial services. So my co-founder Mike and I, we worked as machine learning engineers previously, building algorithms for banks and insurance companies. And then we span out with this idea of building the infrastructure that we always wanted to have when we were building these solutions because it was so hard to deploy anything in production. And then the traction we got from the early days was in lending because people cared about the models, they cared about the governance, and they cared about doing it a better way. And then from there, we talked to a lot of lenders out there and we realized, well, machine learning is nice, but it's actually not the biggest problem for most companies. The biggest problems are around data acquisition and then rules engines imposing strategy. So once we added that to the modeling layer, the rules engine and the data integrations, then it became really attractive because suddenly we could do end-to-end use cases. We could do onboarding, we could do KYC, we could do credit underwriting, and we could help people launch new products really quickly. And that was the big unlock for us as a company. And from there, we've then evolved to add more and more capabilities, more use cases, and became broader as a company.
Got it. You kind of started in the middle of the stack in a way, right? Because usually, or
Yeah,
actually at the top of the stack, because usually people start with like some layer of data acquisition and then they'll build a rules engine and then they'll do the machine learning portion of it. But you really started the machine learning and then worked your way downstream.
that's right. I think the way I think about it is it was sort of a zoom in and a zoom out pivot at the same time. So we had this machine learning platform that we sold initially when we started out in summer 2020 when we did Y Combinator. We sold to everybody, like e-commerce companies, pharma companies. We tried really a cross industry thing.
Yeah.
It was really hard. I mean, being so horizontal is really, really difficult because you end up trying to be everything for everyone. So in a way, it was a zoom in to say, okay, let's focus on financial services.
Mhm.
Um, but it was also a zoom out because we said, let's go wider in the value chain. So we built a broader platform that can do more and be more end to end. And that's the sense in which we zoomed out. But there's also a sense of zooming in on a handful of use cases that we wanted to solve for. And I think that was really important at that time to find strong PMF.
Got it. As you kind of spoke to those initial design partners and lenders, what were the early kind of learnings that you had about where underwriting or risk workflows kind of needed to evolve?
So one thing that was a big strength and still is to this day is that we came from this machine learning world. So we um, adopted a lot of the practices that came from that world, even when we built the rules engine. One example is backtesting, backtesting
Mhm.
simulation. So because we came from this machine learning world, it's very obvious to us that anytime you retrain a model, anytime you change your rules, you want to run a pretty sophisticated backtest on this. It's like for me,
Mhm.
it's like a trivial thing almost. But then you look at the traditional decision engines. I mean, they're terrible at this. Like try running a million data points through any decision engine, they'll all fall over. It's like it's one of the things that for us was obvious that this is how we have to build it, and it has to be fast and it has to be good. But nobody can do this in the market. Um, so I think we gained a lot from taking the machine learning best practices and translating them to a world where this is done by a risk analyst who's probably not as technical, but knows the domain really well. And we want to give the same value. Same with, for example, workflows around versioning. So
Mhm.
we thought, well, obviously this has to be like GitHub, right? I mean, there has to be sort of a pull request where you show your changes, you see the diff of the changes, and then somebody proves the changes, and then that becomes the new main thing.
Mhm.
There's no rules engine that does a good job at this in the market, other than what we ended up building, which is very much inspired by GitHub. It's a little bit more user friendly. It's a bit simpler. Um, has a bit of Google Docs inspiration as well. Um, but I think we gained a lot of value from just taking these things, adapting them to our user persona, our use case, and doing this arbitrage between fields.
Got it. Do you find that kind of translating from a very technical background to very non or generally non-technical risk analysts or operational folk, is that a pretty large kind of hurdle for them to jump? Like, do they have to learn tactile to make this work, or is this a little bit simpler?
I mean, I wouldn't say that our audience is non-technical. They typically know SQL pretty well. They are really sophisticated with spreadsheets. They often know a bit of Python, a bit of Jupyter notebooks, this kind of thing. So they are not backend engineers, but they have other skills that are very important. But they are actually pretty technical. I think typically they understand the logical structure of all these things. So it's pretty easy to get the hang of it. We have some tutorials, and most people will figure it out very quickly. And then they end up using it for more and more use cases. But if you're like an Excel Plus user, I mean, it's totally fine to learn it. And then we have an AI copilot that can help you.
Yeah.
You don't have to write any code. If you say, "Hey, look, I have a complex calculation here," I mean, you just make the copilot write you the code. I mean, Claude is so good now at generating code, especially for you know small scale thing, which in decisioning, the code you need to write is typically a function. So it's very
Yeah.
confined. The data structure is very clear. I mean, Claude is extremely good at this. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of nice to be building in 2025, where if your mission is to empower people to be agile, move fast at their own speed without dependency on engineering teams, IT teams, etc. I mean, code generation is really nice. I mean, it's like really helpful in furthering the mission.
Yeah. I think reading a series of tweets a few weeks ago, which basically said that co-pilots today are basically like almost like SFDC developers that are in-house for you, right? Like where any non-technical person can go into this thing and it will figure out how to do it in your platform, and you just have to kind of tell it in natural language. Do you think that's true in Tactile as well?
I mean, for sure, yeah. And I think that we also want to be the place where this happens. So I think the idea that you have a product person or a business person, and then they spin up Cursor and they actually write code that gets deployed as a microservice in your Kubernetes cluster. I mean, that's I think today a little crazy still. There's not enough guardrails, not enough checking, etc. But we have a much more constrained environment where we can actually let people quite loose. I mean, if you want to write, functions on Tactile, I mean, everything is so well sandboxed and well tested. It's pretty safe, and engineering teams don't find it crazy scary to give their business and product folks that power. I think they would never give you the power of, cursor now push to my GitHub, etc. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But within that really nice sandbox where you can test the thing, it's quite a visual. You have good governance, good tracking, etc. That's very powerful.
No, absolutely. I think there's a long line of developers behind me who have regretted giving me push access to their Git, where I
I
have
mean, there's
definitely
still a
broken stuff.
review and sign off process there, but I think, I mean, you don't need that flexibility typically, right? The types of changes people want to make, they are more in the domain. They want to change a threshold, they want to change a calculation, they want to
Yeah,
add a new variable, etc. So you don't need the full power of a code base, right? You don't need to be exposed to any of this. And by constraining it a bit, you can then make them move faster, safer, but as much oversight.
fair enough.
One interesting question is like in the future, what will this look like, right? So you could imagine, you know, on our side, we have this idea of a decision flow. We also have this idea of a decision agent. But
Mhm.
let's say in the flow world where we have mostly deterministic flows, inject some AI here and there, maybe this will become more of a co-pilot that generates code and explains the code to you, and it'll be more a couple of code blocks that are really well explained rather than having any of these visual components, because maybe it's more natural language translation between the code blocks and the author, which is fine for us. I mean, works already.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of like a risk analyst's job is now just to really set the guardrails for what the agent is allowed to do, and then just ensure that that kind of translates into what's
Yeah.
fair enough. I would argue that you guys are some of the more AI forward decision engines out there. You started out with your Copilot, which just kind of writes rules, and now you've translated that a little bit into AI agents, and starting to put out this kind of hub for this. Help me think through the strategy for Tactile and how it's
Yeah.
really utilizing AI tactically.
The ironic thing here is that we were deploying transformer models in summer 2020. I looked this up recently, and when we deployed the first transformer, this was before ChatGPT, right? Before anyone actually knew this is a thing on our more machine learning focused platform. We had people doing exactly this stuff that 3 years later was just exploding in the world. So we've always had this going on, but there was a period where we were just too busy building out a lot of this because we had all the other things going on.
Right.
So it's very exciting right now where we have a lot of investment and a lot of releases also in making the platform really sort of AI forward, AI native, and harvesting that power. And the framework I like using for this is there's really two very distinct ways of using AI. One is more the co-pilot for the risk team. So this
Mhm.
is not using AI in your customer decisions at all. This is more the co-pilot to build the decisions, the co-pilot to explain the decisions, the co-pilot to explain the changes, the co-pilot to detect your anomalies, or the
Mhm.
agent to detect your anomalies, the agent to help you optimize your flows, etc., right? So all the things that a human would do today on the platform or even off the platform, just make their lives much easier. Like take away
Mhm.
all the stuff, that's sort of simple, it's boring, and make them really focus on the hard things. So that's one area of investment where the Copilot fits in, but there's a lot more you can do there, in which we are doing. And the other area is AI actually making decisions, and that's also super valuable because suddenly, because AI has become so good at documents, at unstructured data, at sort of messy, ambiguous tasks, suddenly a lot of things become automatable. And
Mhm.
once they're automatable, they become available for decisioning. So one really strong conviction we have is think about this as automation is the wrong way to think about it. Like automation is the first step, but once you've automated it, it becomes a decisioning task, and then you can start optimizing it. And that's why
Mhm.
the decision engine for the AI age, or the decision engine in the AI age, will have a massive push and massive revival, because suddenly you have all these things that are automated that used to be, oh, here's my standard operating procedure for this and that process. There's a long PDF, and sometimes people follow the PDF if you're lucky, and sometimes they don't, but you really have actually no idea what's going on. You go from that to, oh, everything is tracked, everything is super rigid, everybody follows the rules. I can tweak this a little bit, see what happens. I can tweak this a little bit, see what happens. And you can start optimizing these decisions. So they become more like consumer credit decisions, even though other processes are much more manual today.
Mhm.
They're extremely exciting and powerful. Um,
So is there the ability in Tactile today to have multiple types of the same agent running and getting?
yeah, for sure. I mean, you can basically go and say, oh, here's a thing where we'd normally push this to manual review. And before it goes to manual review, you have an agent look at it. And then the agent does the first 5 steps in the SOP. And then maybe it can also already resolve the ticket, but for sure it can already do a lot of the stuff the human would be doing. And then you really focus your human reviewers on the interesting, the hard cases, the stuff that is not obvious. And there's a ton of value there. I mean, all of our customers are super excited about tackling the L1 reviews, tackling all their false positives. Um, there's so many low-hanging fruit there.
Can you give me a success story and a failure story?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the success side, we work with a B2B lender in the US, and they have automated basically all the work with the financial statements. So this used to be fully manual, looking at financials, expecting the numbers, blah, 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 blah. They've gone to full automation. It's kind of shocking, actually. It's like you go from zero automation to full automation. And then there's some review for the high loans, etc. But the initial process of scoring is like fully automated now.
So tell me, so that's like on the client app side, the client uploads financial statements. The OCR is done directly in Tactile, and the financial spreading is also done directly in Tactile.
Correct.
Okay. And the data is restructured and shown to the, or it doesn't really matter in the AI
It's
agent.
restructured and then it gets pushed through the scorecards, etc. And then it also gets displayed to a human underwriter. For the cases they do still manually underwrite, but they also have a substantial fraction that they have actually automated, which is pretty cool.
Interesting. Now, that brings me to, I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I think this is the right time. Tactile is allowing folks to build their own agents.
Correct.
There is a whole swarm of third-party agents that are all companies that are building third-party agents.
Yeah.
How do you kind of figure out that kind of natural tension between you and the participants in your data marketplace? Because you're allowing people to build, but they want you to hire, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're not opinionated on this. I think it's a case of pick the best tool for the job. So our philosophy on this is that the vast majority of these agents will have to be customized for a dedicated company. And the bigger the company gets, the more they will rely on customization. So I don't think it's possible to say, oh, here's my black box SMB underwriting agent. Eat it, dear JP Morgan. I think they're going to be like, you must be joking. So there will be a lot of customization around how these agents work. So what we're giving people is a blueprint. Tell them, hey, you can get started with this agent. It'll work. It's actually pre-tested. Here's how we did it. But I know your data will look a bit different. Your population is a bit different. Your strategy is a bit different. You will want to adjust it. Here's how you adjust it. So that's the philosophy. Now, if you have a process like underwriting for SMBs, it's not one agent. That's going to be 17 agents. There's one agent for doing KYB. There's going to be one agent for doing spreading. There's going to be one agent for doing the scoring. There's going to be a lot of rules as well, by the way, not just magic AI stuff. There's going to be a lot of rules as well, which is why the platform, I think, works nicely in merging both the more agentic freeform intelligence, but also the scripted scorecards, etc. So you're gonna have all these sub agents, and I really very open to people in the marketplace providing me a really good financial spreading agent, and then you can tell the customer the same way we tell the customer today, hey, you want LexisNexis or Comply Advantage? I mean, we have both. There's reasons to use one or the other. Here are the pros and cons. Your strategy. The same way, I think they can say, well, I want this spreading or that spreading. We can give them some spreading. They can use something from somebody else. I'm fine with that. I want to be the place where all these decisions live. But where we have marketplace versus our own staff, it doesn't matter. I mean, the main thing is that the overall decision needs to be good. That's the value we provide the customer. The customers also don't care. I mean, they really couldn't care less if it's like something we build or a partner builds. I mean, as long as it's easy to consume and it works well, that's the only thing that matters.
Going back to my earlier question, a story of failure.
I mean, I think there's some cases where the models were just not there yet. So, for example, if you look at even Copilot, right? The early days of Copilot, it was really hard for models to understand the structure of our decisions and the decision flows. If you go back to, say, this was the time of GPT, it was before 4, I think it was like GPT-3 at the time. GPT-3 was actually not that good. Like at the time it was revolutionary because the step up from 2 to 3 was like magic, right? 2 was like, oh, it's kind of cool, and it was like you could see the promise, but it was wrong so often that it was like a bit toyish. And then when
Hmm.
you created 3, it was like, oh, holy shit, like this actually can do some stuff pretty decently well. Um, but if you compare 3 to 4, oh, there was another huge step up in like capability, cost, speed, etc. And I think in the GPT-3 days, I mean, it got confused so many times. It was like you asked for structured output, for example, which is everything we do is structured output.
Hmm.
Want in the end, the agent needs to produce something that our APIs can consume. And this was a time when, I mean, you will forget the brackets, the JSON was invalid. It was so much work to get this
Hmm.
to actually function. And ultimately, with the new model generations, it just, every generation things got better and better and better. And I think that's the exciting but also slightly funky part of building with AI, where you really have to build now for what's going to be possible in 6 months, and you don't quite know what's going to be possible, but for sure it's going to be better. Um, but I think the early days of Copilot were, I mean, it was rough because the models are just not that good. Um, I think one thing we're still seeing sometimes is like we think documents is a really big use case. Like it's a really important use case because everybody still has documents and paper. That's what's blocking a lot of automation.
Hmm.
Um, And the modern sort of AI-based document intelligence, I think, is extremely powerful, but documents still need to be in decent shape. And some
Hmm.
companies have really terrible documents. So if the quality, like rotation, bad quality, etc., I think the models still trip over every now and then on things that a human would find quite trivial. So that's something where I think there's a lot of movement. A lot of people are working on document intelligence. I think that's going to be in a year's time, it's going to be way, way better from where it is today.
Got it. Fair enough. Now, you guys have recently launched the SMB agent. Um, Tell me more and tell me why you started with that specific use case.
Yeah, I mean, great question. The way I think about which agent to launch is, I mean, there's a couple of dimensions we care about. I mean, the first dimension is obviously value. Is there obvious value here? And in SMB lending, if you can go from it takes a week to underwrite a company to it takes 20 minutes, or maybe
Hmm.
it takes like, some you automate really fast and then some you take a few hours, but on average you get to something like an hour or even a couple of hours. Like a couple of things happen. One is you save money because it takes less time. Usually that's not so interesting because there's not that many people doing this, and I think the ROI on saving underwriter time is like there's some there, but I think it's not the most exciting thing. I think what's really exciting to people is what does that do to the UX of getting a loan? Because suddenly a broker, for example, I mean, instead of waiting for 7 days, they get an instant response. That changes the game completely on conversion. So you
Hmm.
start working on the top line for these companies. So that's really exciting. I think there's another value prop here, which is consistency of the decisions and steerability. You talk to leaders in SMB underwriting, for them it's quite hard to actually steer, change the rules. If they want to change the rules of how they underwrite, that's the whole change management process. Once it's fully automated, or at least automated until the final review, well, that becomes turning a knob. So you get the decision quality up. Again, massive lever on the business because that operates on the top line as well as on the profitability of the whole book. And then the final thing is also helping people grow without hiring too many people. So more on the growth side of things. A lot of companies we work with, they're growing really fast and they just cannot hire underwriters fast enough. So there are periods where they don't underwrite because they don't have capacity. So that's also, I think, an exciting value prop. And I think all of these things together, they make for a really attractive pot of useful value you can provide to your customer. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing we think about is what's our right to play in this versus
Hmm.
somebody else's. And we've been, especially in credit, I think clearly like we have something going on there. We have a lot of footprint in credit, both in B2B as well as in consumer credit. So this is our home. We have the customer base already. It's very easy for us to build something that we can validate with existing customers. Um, and then the third thing is complementarity to the existing product we have. So we have all the data integrations, be it the bureau data, the compliance data, the alternative data, etc. So that all feeds into into the agent. So we could reuse and leverage a lot of what already existed that others don't have. Take that together and it becomes a really attractive package to start an SMB lending.
Got it. When you your second point is about what customers can kind of adopt very quickly. What are they asking for on top of this now? What's like top of mind for customers?
Yeah, I mean, we work with some customers. Depends on the segment you're talking about.
Hmm.
If you talk to fintech, they really care about specific modules there. It's interesting that often they want a sub piece of the modules we provide, which we're fine with. I mean, it's one of the strengths of the product. It's very modular. So you can say,
Hmm.
well, like actually, this part we don't need because we have it sorted out already. This part is really interesting. So I want this sub piece, and now let's really prove out that this is better than what we have internally. If you go to enterprise, a lot of them really rethink the whole stack. So it's the opposite. It's like, oh, I need to rethink my entire journey of origination.
Hmm.
Actually, I need to rethink the LOS I use for SMB lending, and I need to rethink the front end. So there, it's the opposite where they want to use us for everything, and we have to figure out, okay, well, front end, that seems like a consulting job, right? So
Hmm.
let's find a partner who's really good at building front ends in banking, and you know, that I think is the interesting bit of where do you position yourself and how do you inject yourself there. But we definitely see that a lot of big companies that they do know they have to change because the user expectations are just going to change so fast. The moment other people underwrite within an hour,
Hmm.
I think people's expectation for or people's willingness to wait for a week, I mean, it just drops really rapidly.
Fair, fair enough. Um, let's talk a little bit about adoption. Uh, uh, Pilot purgatory. It has been a thing
Yeah,
and will continue to be a thing. I think a lot of companies today are AI curious, agent curious. How do you kind of get them over that hurdle?
yeah. I mean, I think the critical thing is go step by step, prove value. I mean, this is trivial stuff, I think, but you go step by step, you prove value early, and maybe do a small thing before you do a big thing. But
Hmm.
I'll give you an example of a use case we see surprisingly often, which is quite a simple use case. It's just checking that the application is complete. Do any underwriting. All you do is you make sure that before a human ever looks at it, you have all the things you need. And if you don't, you actually tell the customer, actually, you need to upload this document or whatever. Ideally, you do this right away. You do it when the customer is already there.
Hmm.
They upload stuff, they uploaded the wrong thing, or they forgot something. You tell them right away, don't leave. Give me the full thing, please, and then we're gonna look at it. That's a very non-threatening type of use case, right? Because you're not displacing anyone, you're not really taking a risk on anything. I mean, the worst case that can happen is you tell the customer that, I don't know, they missed something that they didn't miss, but it's not like a very consequential mistake. So that's, I
Hmm.
think, a really beautiful use case to start with because there's obvious value and it's really easy to convince people to do it. And then from there, well, once you've checked the documents, you've already understood the documents, you've already structured the documents. I mean, you've done a lot of hard work already. You can then start pre-scoring the documents, and then you can expand as people get more comfortable with the results.
Got it.
I
So,
mean, I do think that this idea that, oh, we don't trust the AI, right? This is still a bit of a legacy from the GPT-3 days when it was really unreliable. I mean, I don't know about you, but I use Claude really like every day.
mhm.
I mean, even 4 was already pretty good. I mean, 4.5 is like next gen, really, really good. But my trust in these models has gone up a lot in the last 6 to 12 months to the extent that I think the worry about hallucinations has become such a sideshow. I mean, they just don't elucidate as much because we've figured out how to build these applications. We put enough context. We rely much more on summarization from the model and less on using them for information retrieval, basically, or for the information in the model. And that's a really a step change, right? I think people haven't internalized this yet that models aren't as bad as they used to be 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Um, and because everybody's using this in their private lives, I think this will trickle through pretty quickly.
I tend to agree with that. I think that we're in this like very unique space where the consumer is in their day-to-day life is using
Exactly.
this platform. So they learn how to manipulate it for their own use cases. So when it comes to work, it just becomes that much easier, right? It's
Correct. Exactly. I mean,
it
also,
becomes
I think this is also very different from the machine learning sort of revolution. So when we started our careers, my co-founder and I, 14, 15, 16, sort of the big data hype, it was different because the execs kind of they were told this is important, but they couldn't feel it because it's very abstract and
yeah,
like they go and train a model in their private lives. They'll go play a casual competition or so.
yeah,
But now they use ChatGPT all day long too. So
yeah.
I think it's much more visceral and much more tangible to people that this thing actually works.
Got it. Um, Two questions before we close out. Anyone listening on the risk and compliance side, and they're thinking about agentic decisioning, what do you want them to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that it really has changed a lot in the last 12 months. What's possible and what's feasible, and everything a human does today, where they can do the task in less than 5 or 10 minutes. I think you should think about, can this be automated? Because the answer most likely is yes, or at least a subpart of these tasks can be automated. And I think the way to think about it is not just about automating it, but it's also about, in the end, making better decisions. I mean, we've never had better tools to understand our customers. Like the way that also for regulators, right? Like regulators, they say, oh, AI is like risky and this and that. But on the other hand, regulators also want financial institutions to really understand the customer base and come through the customer base all the time. We've never had better tools to do that. So they should be really excited about this.
And last question, my signature question. What's the dealio with Tactile in coming into 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about what's to come. I think it's very hard to actually project into H2 already because we don't know what the future will bring, but we're definitely doubling down a lot on AI adoption and we want to be the player through which financial institutions adopt AI for their risk and compliance use cases. I mean, that's our ambition and that's a big goal. There's a lot of value there for sure, and we're working hard to do that.
Awesome. Max, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time and super excited to see what Tactile comes up with next.
Thank you for having me.